The starship Baekdu came out of its final jump with a soft shudder, and the bridge crew held their breath. Through the wide front windows, Harmony Ring filled the view, a massive station shaped like a silver wheel, spinning slowly against a backdrop of unfamiliar stars. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was real. Han Do-hyun stood near the captain's chair, with his hands folded behind his back. He was a tall man in his mid-40s, with a calm face that never showed too much of anything. He had spent 20 years as a crisis negotiator back on Earth, talking down warlords and madmen, and he had been chosen for this mission because he never lost his temper. Not once, not ever. "We are being scanned," said Captain Kwon Tae-sun from his seat. He was a broad-shouldered naval officer, with short gray hair and steady hands. He had commanded warships and rescue fleets, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nobody on Earth had ever met an alien before. "They are sending us docking instructions." "Then let us dock," Do-hyun said simply. Beside him, Yoon Nari was already reviewing the alien signals on her tablet. She was the team's language expert, a woman in her early 30s, with bright eyes and a habit of smiling, even when she was nervous. She had spent 7 years studying the fragments of alien communication that Earth had intercepted. She could read 3 alien scripts and speak broken phrases in 2 galactic trade languages. She was the best humanity had. She was also scared out of her mind, but she hid it well. The Baekdu docked at one of the station's outer arms. The airlock opened with a hiss, and the smell hit them first, something clean and metallic with a faint sweetness underneath. The corridor beyond was wide and smooth, made of a pale material that seemed to glow from within. Everything was quiet. Everything was perfect. 6 aliens from 6 different species, each one stranger than the last. Some were tall and thin, with skin like polished stone. Others were short and broad, with too many eyes. One floated above the ground in a bubble of shimmering light. They wore robes and sashes marked with symbols that Nari recognized as Concord rank insignia. The tallest alien stepped forward. It had a long face with no visible mouth, and it spoke through a device clipped to its collar. The translation came out flat and mechanical. "You are the humans. You are expected. The tribunal will see you now." Do-hyun bowed slightly. "Thank you. We are honored." They were led through corridors that stretched for what felt like kilometers. Nari walked beside Do-hyun and whispered observations. The station was old, very old. Some of the wall panels showed wear patterns that suggested thousands of years of use. The Concorde had been here for a long, long time. It was a circular room with seats rising in tiers on every side, filled with hundreds of alien representatives from species across the galaxy. At the center was a raised platform where the 3 senior tribunal judges sat. They were ancient beings, massive and still, watching the humans with eyes that held no warmth. Do-hyun and his team were given a small platform at the floor level. They stood there, 5 humans, in a room full of 4,000 years of galactic civilization, and they presented their case. They talked for 2 days. They brought gifts of music and art. They shared scientific data freely. They proposed trade agreements that were generous and fair. They showed images of Earth, its oceans, its forests, its cities full of light. They spoke about cooperation and learning, and the hope that humanity could contribute to the galactic community. The tribunal listened. They asked questions. They studied the data. And on the 3rd day, they delivered their answer. The chief judge rose slowly. Its voice filled the chamber like the sound of grinding stone. "We have reviewed your species in full. Your biology, your history, your social patterns, your psychological profile. You are classified as a Category 9 adaptive predator species. You are driven by competition, territorial instinct, and emotional volatility. Your history is a record of continuous internal warfare. You adapt too quickly. You consume too much. You are, by every measure we possess, Dangerous. The chamber was silent. 4,000 species watching, waiting. Earth is formally excluded from the Galactic Concord. You will not be granted trade rights, star maps, or transit permissions. You are instructed to remain within your home system. This decision is final and unanimous. Nari felt her stomach drop. She looked at Do-hyun, expecting anger, expecting shock, but Do-hyun's face had not changed at all. He stood perfectly still, his hands still folded, his expression as calm as a lake on a windless day. He looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of species after species. Some looked away. Some stared back with open hostility. But many, more than Nari expected, looked uncomfortable, nervous. She realized with a shock that they were not just rejecting humanity. They were afraid of it. Do-hyun stepped forward and spoke in a clear, quiet voice. We understand. We thank the tribunal for its time and consideration. We wish you all well. That was it. No argument, no anger, no begging. He bowed once, turned, and walked out. His team followed. The chamber erupted in confused murmuring behind them. No rejected species had ever responded like that. They always argued. They always pleaded. They always broke. The humans just left. On the walk back to the Baekdu, nobody spoke. Nari was shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. Captain Taesun's jaw was tight. The other team members stared at the floor. Only Do-hyun seemed unchanged. They boarded the ship. The airlock sealed, the docking clamps released, and the Baekdu pulled away from Harmony Ring, turning its nose back toward the distant dot of Earth's sun. On the bridge, Captain Taesun sat in his chair and let out a long breath. He looked at Do-hyun, who was standing by the window, watching the station shrink behind them. Are you disappointed? Taesun asked. Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. Then a small smile appeared on his face. Not a happy smile, but the kind of smile a man wears when he knows something that nobody else in the room has figured out yet. They just told the most stubborn species in the universe that it cannot have something, he said softly. What do you think happens next? Taesun stared at him. Then, slowly, he began to smile too. Behind them, Harmony Ring disappeared into the dark. Ahead of them, the stars waited. All of them. 42 years of silence. That is what the galaxy heard from Earth after the rejection. No angry broadcasts, no desperate pleas, no threats or tantrums. Just silence. Deep, patient, and absolute. The Concord took this as a sign that humanity had accepted its place. They filed Earth under contained in their records and moved on to other matters. They could not have been more wrong. Baek Ji-sok was not the kind of man who gave speeches. He was short, thin, and quiet, with round glasses and ink-stained fingers. He spoke in numbers and diagrams. He ate his meals at his desk. He slept 4 hours a night, and spent the rest thinking about problems that most people could not even understand. When the United Earth Council created Project Horizon, the classified initiative to make humanity a spacefaring civilization without galactic help, they put Ji-sok in charge because he was the smartest person alive and because he did not care about politics. He only cared about building things. The project was massive. Every nation on Earth contributed resources. Old rivalries between countries did not disappear overnight, but they became smaller. It was hard to argue about borders when the whole species had been told it was not good enough. The rejection had done something that centuries of diplomacy had failed to do. It had given humanity a common enemy, not the Concord itself, but the idea that humans could be kept in a box. Shin Yuna joined the project in its 3rd year. She was a propulsion engineer from Busan, with oil under her fingernails, and a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush. She was loud where Ji-sok was quiet, rough where he was precise, and absolutely brilliant in ways that made other engineers nervous. Ji-sok liked her immediately because she was the only person who argued with him and was sometimes right. The Concorde used something called slipstream drives, elegant, efficient engines built on physics that humanity barely understood. Earth had no access to slipstream technology, no star maps, no alien alliances. They had to build everything from nothing. So they did. It took Yuna's team 11 years. 11 years of failures, explosions, dead ends, and sleepless nights. 11 years of funding battles and political pressure and people saying it could not be done. But on a cold morning in 2263, in an underground facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Yuna's prototype engine folded space for the first time. The test drone disappeared from its launch bay and reappeared 14 light-years away, near a star that no human had ever visited. They called it the Void Drive. It was not elegant. It was not efficient. It shook ships apart if the shielding was not perfect, and it made a sound during activation that one technician described as God slamming a door. It was fast, and it was entirely human. Yuna called Ji-seok from the control room, her voice shaking. "It works," she said. "The ugly thing actually works." Ji-seok was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Good. Now build me 50 more." The next phase was colonization. Ji-seok identified a star system that the Concorde had catalogued in old intercepted signals as barren and without value. Humans went there anyway. What they found surprised everyone. The planets were harsh, high radiation, thin atmospheres, brutal temperature swings. But the geology was extraordinary. Rare minerals that human technology could use, but that Concorde species apparently could not metabolize or process. Riches, hidden in places that the galaxy had written off as worthless. Humanity built its first colony there. They called it Outpost Jindo, after a small island back on Earth known for its stubborn, resilient people. Within 10 years, Jindo had 200,000 residents, a functioning government, schools, hospitals, shipyards, and children who had never seen Earth's sky, but called themselves human with fierce pride. Park Min-ho arrived at Jindo as a young astrophysicist, 26 years old and full of questions. He had grown up hearing stories about the rejection. Every child on Earth did. And he had dedicated his life to understanding the galaxy that had turned humanity away. His job at Jindo was to study the intercepted Concorde star maps and look for useful patterns. What he found instead was something far more interesting. The maps had gaps. Huge regions of space that the Concorde had simply marked as restricted or abandoned. Minho dug deeper and discovered that these dead zones were places where old civilizations had collapsed, where dangerous phenomena had been recorded, where the Concorde's careful, cautious species simply refused to go. Humans, of course, went immediately. The dead zones were dangerous. Some ships were lost. Some crews came back with stories that gave people nightmares. But they also found resources, old technology from fallen civilizations, and most importantly, knowledge. Every mission into the dead zones taught humanity something new about the galaxy. Lessons that the Concorde had been too afraid to learn. Back on Earth, Yun-Nari was now in her 70s. She had left government service decades ago and become a professor of xenocultural studies at a university in Seoul. She had spent her career studying the Concorde from afar, analyzing every scrap of intercepted communication. She understood the alien alliance better than almost anyone alive. She published a paper that year with a title that became famous across every human colony and station. The paper was long and academic, but its core message was simple. The Concorde was not a civilization of explorers. It was a civilization of survivors. They had built their alliance around safety, caution, and the careful management of risk. They avoided anything that might upset the balance. They grew slowly. They changed slowly. They feared anything that moved fast and adapted quickly. Humans were everything they feared. The paper's final line became humanity's unofficial motto, printed on shirts and painted on the hulls of ships. They forgot we build our own doors. And then, in the 42nd year of silence, the Concorde finally noticed what had happened. A scout ship from one of the Concorde's border patrol species was conducting a routine survey in what should have been empty space. Instead, it found Outpost Jindo, not a small research station, not a struggling outpost, a thriving city in space, with ships coming and going, with lights shining from a dozen orbital platforms, with 200,000 humans living their lives as if they had always belonged among the stars. The scout transmitted its report back to the tribunal. The message was flagged as urgent, then as critical, then as a matter of galactic security. The tribunal convened an emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The scout's final observation, buried at the end of the report, was the line that kept the tribunal members awake at night. They are not confined. They were never confined. The plague came without warning. The Valesi were a gentle species, tall, thin beings with translucent skin and soft voices, who had been members of the Concorde for over 6,000 years. They were artists and philosophers, builders of beautiful things, and they had never harmed anyone. When the sickness began spreading through their home worlds, they trusted that the Concorde would save them. The Concorde had always saved them, but the Concorde could not save them this time. The disease attacked the Valesi nervous system, shutting down their bodies, one organ at a time, over the course of weeks. It was slow and cruel. The Concorde's medical scientists, the finest minds of 4,000 species, studied it for 2 years and found nothing. Their medicine was advanced but narrow. They had not faced a real plague in millennia. They had built a civilization so safe, so controlled, that they had forgotten how to fight something that did not follow the rules. Millions of Valesi were dying, and nobody in the Concorde knew what to do. The request came quietly, not through official channels. The tribunal would never have allowed it. A Valesi diplomat stationed at a neutral trading post sent an encrypted message to the nearest human outpost. It was short and desperate. It said, "We are dying. Our doctors have failed. We have heard that your species knows how to fight plagues. Please help us. Please." The message reached a small border station commanded by Li Sung-ho. He was a field medic, 34 years old, with a kind face and hands that were always busy, fixing something, helping someone, holding a child who had scraped a knee. He had joined the Deep Space Medical Corps because he believed that the best thing a person could do was ease suffering. He did not care whose suffering it was. Sung-ho read the Valesi message 3 times. Then he forwarded it up the chain of command with a single note attached. "These people need help. We should give it." The message traveled fast. Within days, it reached Earth's leadership. The debate was immediate and fierce. Some voices said no. They remembered the rejection. They remembered standing in that tribunal chamber, while 4,000 species voted to lock humanity out. Why should humans risk their people, spend their resources, and cross into hostile territory to save a species that had supported their exclusion? Let the Concorde solve its own problems. Let them learn what it felt like to be alone. Other voices said yes, not out of politics or strategy, but because it was the right thing to do. People were dying. That was enough. The argument might have gone on for weeks, but then Han Do-hyun spoke. Longevity treatments had kept his body functional, but he moved slowly, and his voice was softer than it had been. His mind, however, was as sharp as ever. He had been retired for years, living quietly in a small house on Outpost Jindo, tending a garden and reading books. When the government asked him to advise on the Valesi situation, he came without hesitation. He stood before the council, a thin old man in a plain gray suit, and he said something that ended the debate in 3 sentences. "If we only help those who were kind to us, then we are no different from the Concorde. We are better than that. We have always been better than that. The vote was unanimous. Earth would help. Admiral Cho Eun-ji organized the mission. She was the highest-ranking officer in humanity's deep space fleet. A woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back tight, and eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her career preparing for the possibility of war with the Concorde. She had studied their fleet movements, their weapons, their tactics. She knew exactly how to fight them. But this mission was not about fighting. Eun-ji assembled a medical fleet of 12 ships, loaded with doctors, equipment, and supplies. She ordered every weapon on every ship powered down and locked. The fleet would enter Concorde space unarmed, broadcasting peaceful intent on every frequency. Her officers thought she was insane. She told them that showing up with guns would prove every terrible thing the Concorde believed about humans. Showing up without them would prove something else entirely. The fleet crossed into Concorde space on a bright morning by Earth's calendar. Eun-ji stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the border markers pass. Somewhere out there, Concorde patrol ships were tracking them. Warning messages flooded in. Turn back. You are not authorized. You will be fired upon. Eun-ji broadcast one message in reply. We are here to help. We are unarmed. Shoot us, if you must. Nobody shot. The fleet reached the Valesi home system in 6 days. What they found broke hearts across the human ships. Orbital hospitals overflowing, cities under quarantine. The sound of Valesi morning songs, high, thin, beautiful sounds, broadcasting endlessly on local channels. Lee Sung-ho was on the first shuttle down. He walked into a Valesi medical center and found chaos. Patients lying in corridors, doctors weeping, children too weak to cry. He set down his medical kit, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. The human doctors worked in shifts around the clock. They brought with them something that the Concorde scientists did not have. Centuries of experience fighting diseases that evolved, mutated, and adapted. The Black Death, smallpox, influenza, COVID. Humanity had been fighting biological enemies since before it had a name, and it had developed an instinct for the work that no amount of advanced technology could replace. Within 2 weeks, Sung-ho's team identified the mechanism of the plague. Within 3 weeks, they had a treatment protocol. Within 6 weeks, the death rate dropped by 90%. Human doctors moved from world to world across the Valesi systems, training local medical staff, distributing treatments, and saving lives. The Concorde watched in stunned silence. Their best scientists had failed for 2 years. The excluded species, the dangerous ones, the predators, the animals, had solved it in weeks. Not with superior technology, with stubbornness, creativity, and an ancient familiarity with suffering. The tribunal held emergency sessions. Some members demanded that the human fleet be expelled immediately, plague or no plague. Others argued that the humans had just done more for a Concorde member than the Concorde itself had managed. The alliance was cracking, and everyone could hear it. But on the ground, far from politics, something simpler was happening. Lee Sung-ho sat in a Valesi recovery ward late one night, feeding soup to a child who was too weak to hold the bowl. He told the child a story about a rabbit on the moon, an old Korean tale, and the child's translucent skin flickered with soft colors that Sung-ho had learned meant laughter. Around him, other human medics were doing the same thing in 100 other wards. Talking to patients, holding hands, making bad jokes in broken alien languages, being human. When the medical fleet finally prepared to leave, the Valesi lined the streets of their capital city. Thousands of them, standing in silence, their skin glowing with the deep blue color that meant gratitude and sorrow combined. An elderly Valesi, a community leader who had once voted to support Earth's exclusion, approached Sung-ho at the landing pad. The alien was frail and slow, and its skin rippled with complex emotions that Sung-ho could not fully read. It reached out and took Sung-ho's hand. Its grip was weak, but deliberate. "Why did you help us?" it asked. "We supported your exclusion. We voted against you." Sung-ho looked at the alien for a long moment. He thought about the rejection, about the decades of silence, about everything humanity had built alone. Then he shrugged. A simple, very human gesture. "People were dying," he said. "That is all that mattered." The elder's skin turned a color that Sung-ho had never seen before, something between silver and deep violet. Its body trembled. It was weeping, not from gratitude, Sung-ho realized, from shame. The fleet lifted off that evening. Admiral Unji watched the Valesi worlds shrink in the rear cameras and said nothing for a long time. Then she turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to Earth," she said. "Tell them it is done. Tell them we are coming home." She paused and added, "Tell them the galaxy is watching now." The Concorde did not break all at once. It cracked slowly, the way ice cracks on a warming river. Quietly at first, then with sounds that carried across the entire galaxy. After the Valesi plague, everything changed. The humans had done what the Concorde could not, and no amount of political maneuvering could erase that fact. Species that had been loyal members for thousands of years began asking uncomfortable questions. If the Concorde could not protect its own, what was it for? If the excluded species were truly dangerous, why had they come with medicine instead of weapons? If the tribunal was wise, why had it been so afraid? The answer split the Concorde into 3 factions, and the split happened fast. The reformists were the first to organize. These were species that had watched the Valesi rescue and felt something they had not felt in millennia. Admiration for an outsider. They wanted to open the doors, invite Earth in, establish trade and cooperation. They argued that humanity's adaptability was not a threat, but a gift, and that the Concorde was dying of its own caution. The purists pushed back hard. These were the old guard, species that had built the Concorde's rules and believed in them absolutely. To them, humanity was proof that the exclusion system worked. The humans had been kept out, and look what had happened. They had grown wild and uncontrollable. The purists did not want dialogue. They wanted containment. They began quietly assembling a military coalition, gathering ships and weapons from allied species, preparing to blockade human space and force Earth back into its home system by threat of annihilation. Between them sat the neutrals, hundreds of species that wanted nothing to do with either side. They were afraid of the humans, afraid of the purists, and mostly afraid of change. They kept their heads down and hoped the storm would pass. It would not pass. Kang Ji-woo found the war plans on a cold night aboard a trading station in neutral space. She was 28 years old, an intelligence operative working under deep cover. She had been living among aliens for 3 years, posing as a freelance translator, building contacts, and listening. She had a quick mind, a quicker tongue, and a talent for making people trust her, even when they probably should not. A purist military attaché, drunk on fermented starflower nectar, had left his communication device unattended for 11 minutes. That was all Ji-woo needed. She copied the files, encrypted them, and transmitted them to Earth within the hour. The files showed everything: fleet positions, timetables, target coordinates. The purists planned to assemble a combined armada of over 800 warships from 12 species. They would position themselves at the border of human space and deliver an ultimatum: dismantle your colonies, surrender your void drives, and return to Earth permanently, or face destruction. The plans reached Admiral Cho Unji at her headquarters on Outpost Jindo. She read them twice, then sat in silence for 10 minutes. Her staff waited nervously. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. "They are scared," she said. Scared people make mistakes. We will not. Unji did not mobilize for war. She mobilized for chess. Over the following weeks, she repositioned the deep space fleet with surgical precision. Human ships appeared at critical junctions throughout neutral space, trade routes, fuel depots, communication relay points. They did not threaten anyone. They did not power up weapons. They simply existed, visible and undeniable. A reminder that humanity was no longer a species that could be cornered. Their intelligence officers reported the human movements with growing alarm. The humans were not preparing to fight. They were preparing to watch. And somehow, that was worse. Back on Earth, Yoon Nari received an urgent call from the government. She was 87 years old now, her hair completely white, her body frail, but her mind still burning. They needed her expertise on Concord psychology. They needed to know what the purists would do. Nari studied the intelligence files for 2 days. Then she gave her assessment. The purist coalition was large but fragile. It was held together by fear, not conviction. Most of the member species did not actually want a war. They had been pressured or frightened into joining. If the coalition could be made to hesitate, even briefly, it would fall apart under its own weight. Do not fight them, Nari advised. Make them think. Thinking is what they are worst at. The purist fleet launched on schedule. 800 warships from 12 species, arranged in a formation that stretched across light years of space. It was the largest military gathering in Concord history. They moved toward human space with the slow, grinding certainty of a glacier. They expected to find a wall of human warships at the border. They expected resistance, defiance, maybe even desperation. What they found instead was a single ship. It was a diplomatic vessel, small and white, broadcasting on every frequency. It carried no weapons. It carried no escort. It carried one passenger. Han Do-hyun was 102 years old. His body was thin and his steps were slow, but he had insisted on coming. He had been the first human to face the Concorde, and he wanted to be the one to face them again. The government had argued. He had ignored all of them with the quiet stubbornness that had defined his entire life. He stood on the bridge of the small ship and watched 800 warships fill his screen. Then he opened a channel, not to the purist fleet, but to everyone. Every species, every station, every ship in the galaxy, a universal broadcast. His voice was thin with age, but perfectly steady. My name is Han Do-hyun. 70 years ago, I stood before your tribunal and was told that my species was too dangerous to join your civilization. I accepted that decision. We went home. We built our own civilization. We asked nothing from you. He paused. The galaxy listened. When your people were dying, we came with medicine. When your borders were open, we did not invade. When we had every reason to hate you, we chose not to. We are everything you said we were, stubborn, emotional, dangerous. But we are also everything you refuse to see. We are kind. We are generous. We build things. We help strangers. His eyes moved across the fleet on his screen. Hundreds of ships, armed and ready, pointing their weapons at one old man in a tin box. If you want war, we will survive it. We always do. But we would rather build something new. The door is open. It was always open. You only have to walk through it. Silence. The broadcast ended. The galaxy held its breath. On the bridge of the purist flagship, the fleet commander stared at the small white ship on the screen and felt something cold settle in its stomach. It was not fear of human weapons. It was fear of human words, of what those words were doing to the coalition behind it. The first defection came within minutes. A species called the Oravi, gentle herbivores who had been pressured into joining, powered down their weapons and broke formation. Their captain broadcast a simple message. We will not fire on unarmed ships. We are going home. Then another species followed, then another. Within an hour, 5 member species had withdrawn. By the end of the day, the number was 8. The Great Purist Armada, 800 ships strong, was bleeding away like water through cracked stone. The fleet commander ordered the remaining ships to hold position, but the authority in its voice was gone. Everyone could hear it. The coalition was finished. On Earth, Nari watched the broadcast from her apartment. She sat in her old chair with a blanket over her knees and tears running down her wrinkled face. She whispered to herself, to the empty room, to the memory of a young woman who had once stood in a tribunal chamber and watched her species be rejected. 50 years, she said. It took them 50 years to realize they were never keeping us out. They were locking themselves in. The Purist fleet retreated in silence. No shots had been fired. No blood had been spilled. The largest military threat in galactic history had been defeated by one old man and a truth that nobody could deny. 3 days later, the reformist faction sent a formal invitation to Earth. Not a request to apply for membership. Not a conditional offer. A full invitation to join the Galactic Concord as an equal member, with all rights and privileges. Admiral Cho Unji received the message on her flagship. She read it carefully, then forwarded it to Earth's government with a single line of annotation at the bottom. The invitation sat on the table like a loaded weapon. Every leader, every colony governor, every citizen across human space knew about it. The Galactic Concord, the same alliance that had rejected humanity 70 years ago, was now asking Earth to join as a full and equal member. It was everything the first generation had dreamed of. It was everything the second generation had fought for. And yet, when the moment finally arrived, humanity hesitated. The debate consumed every corner of human civilization. On Earth, in the colony domes of Jindo, on the deep space stations hanging in the dead zones, people argued in kitchens and council halls and crowded public squares. The question was simple. The answer was not. Hajin understood this better than most. She was 41 years old, the elected leader of the United Earth Council, and the first human leader who had been born off-world. She had grown up on Outpost Jindo, played in low-gravity parks as a child, and studied governance at a university that had not existed when her parents were born. She belonged to a generation that had never known the rejection firsthand. They had only known the building that came after. Hajin called a global and colonial referendum. Every human citizen over the age of 16 would vote. The question: should humanity join the Galactic Concord? The yes camp argued that joining was the natural next step. Humanity had proved itself. The galaxy was offering respect and partnership. Refusing would be petty, holding a grudge that served no one. Trade, shared science, and cultural exchange would benefit every human alive. The no camp argued that joining would erase everything humanity had built. For 70 years, humans had defined themselves by their independence. They had explored the dead zones, built colonies in places the Concord feared to go, and created a civilization that answered to no one. Joining the Concord meant accepting their rules, their structure, their way of doing things. It meant becoming just another member species in an alliance that had already proved it could not be trusted. Both sides were right. Both sides were wrong. Hajin knew it, and she did not know what to do. Park Minho was 68 years old now, gray-haired and weathered by decades of work in deep space. He had become one of humanity's most respected scientists and public voices. A man who had helped map the dead zones, who had unlocked alien technologies, who had spent his life pushing the boundaries of what humans could know. When Hajin asked him to speak at the referendum hearings, he agreed immediately. But he did not argue for yes or no. He argued for something else entirely. "We are asking the wrong question," Minho said, standing before a packed assembly hall on Earth. His voice was steady and warm, the voice of a teacher who had spent a lifetime explaining complicated things in simple words. The question is not whether we should join the Concord. The question is whether the Concord deserves to exist in its current form. The hall went quiet. The Concord was built on fear, Minho continued, fear of the unknown, fear of species that were different. They created categories, safe and dangerous, welcome and excluded. They built a civilization that protected its members by shutting everyone else out. And for 4,000 years it worked. But look at what it cost them. They stopped exploring. They stopped adapting. They stopped growing. When a plague came, they could not fight it. When a crisis came, they could not face it. They locked the doors and forgot how to open them. He looked around the hall at the faces watching him, old and young, Earthborn and colony-born, all of them carrying 70 years of stubborn human pride. We should not join the Concord. We should build something better, something that does not exclude anyone, something that welcomes every species, the dangerous ones, the strange ones, the ones that nobody else wanted. We should build the alliance that the galaxy always needed but was too afraid to create. The hall erupted. Some people cheered. Some people argued. But the idea took root, and it grew fast. Imhajin took Minho's proposal and spent 3 weeks shaping it into something real. She called it the Open Accord. Its principles were simple and radical. No species would be excluded. No species would be categorized as too dangerous. Decisions were made together. Every member had the right to explore, to fail, to adapt, and to ask for help. The only rule was that help, when asked for, would be given freely. It was messy. It was idealistic. It was deeply, impossibly human. Before the referendum vote, Han Do-hyun gave his final public address. He was 103 years old, confined to a wheelchair, his body finally surrendering to time, even as his mind remained clear. He spoke from his home on Jindo, and the broadcast reached every human settlement in existence. I have lived long enough to see something remarkable, he said, his voice thin but unwavering. I stood in an alien chamber 70 years ago and was told that humanity was dangerous. I have thought about that word every day since. Dangerous. He smiled, that same quiet, knowing smile that had unsettled the tribunal all those decades ago. They were right. We are dangerous. We are dangerous to complacency. We are dangerous to fear. We are dangerous to any universe that says you cannot. We do not accept that. We never will. That is not a flaw. That is the best thing about us. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle. Build the Open Accord. Build it for the species out there who were rejected like we were, and had no one to turn to. Build it for the children who will grow up in a galaxy where no one is told they do not belong. Build it because it is the right thing to do, and because we are the kind of species that does the right thing, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. The referendum results came in the next day. The vote was not even close. Humanity chose the third option, not joining the Concord, not remaining isolated, but building something new. Earth formally declined the Concord's invitation. In its place, Hajin announced the Open Accord to the galaxy in a broadcast that reached every corner of known space. The message was clear. Every species was welcome. No exceptions, no categories, no fear. The response came faster than anyone expected. The reformist species from the old Concord joined within days, bringing their knowledge and resources. The neutral species followed within weeks, drawn by the simple promise of a place where they did not have to be afraid. Then came the surprises. Species that the Concord had excluded centuries ago, species that had been hiding in the dead zones, species that nobody even knew existed. They emerged from isolation one by one, stunned and cautious, unable to believe that someone had finally opened a door for them. Even some former purists sent envoys. They came quietly, humbled, carrying the weight of their mistakes. They were welcomed without conditions. That was the point. The old Concord did not collapse in fire or fury. One by one, its remaining members migrated to the open accord, drawn by the energy and possibility that the new alliance offered. Within a year, the tribunal that had once judged humanity unworthy dissolved itself in a short, quiet ceremony that nobody attended. Admiral Cho Eun-ji stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the first joint fleet exercise of the open accord. 100 ships from 100 different species flying together for the first time. It was messy. Some ships flew too fast, others flew too slow. Communication was chaotic, formations were sloppy, and at one point 2 ships nearly collided because their navigation systems used different coordinate standards. Eun-ji watched the chaos and laughed. It was the first time her crew had ever heard her laugh. It was a good sound, warm and real, and full of something that might have been joy. "It is beautiful," she said to no one in particular. "It is alive." Months later, Park Min-ho traveled to Harmony Ring. The old station had been repurposed as the Open Accord's first joint embassy, a place where any species could come, meet, and talk. The same chamber where Do-hyun had been rejected was now a welcome hall, filled with voices and colors and the sound of dozens of languages mixing together. Min-ho stood in the center of the hall, in the exact spot where Do-hyun had once stood and been told he was not welcome. He closed his eyes and let the noise wash over him. Somewhere in the crowd, a Valesi was singing softly. Somewhere else, 2 species that had never met before were attempting to share a meal together and making a mess of it. A young alien diplomat approached him nervously. It was small, with bright eyes and fidgeting hands, clearly new to its position. "Excuse me," it said. "You are human, yes? I have been studying your species. I have a question." "Of course." The young diplomat tilted its head. "Are humans always like this? Building things that no one asked for? Opening doors that others closed? It seems exhausting." Min-ho laughed. It was the same laugh that Eun-ji had laughed on her bridge, surprised, delighted, deeply alive. He looked at the young alien with warmth and with the full weight of 70 years of human stubbornness shining in his eyes. "Always," he said. "It is the most human thing there is." Above them, through the station's transparent dome, the stars stretched out in every direction, infinite, unknown, waiting, and for the first time in galactic history, no one was told they could not reach them.